Hello and well met. This is Layman with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to be taking a look at a little bit of world building, and in particular, I'm creating a session to build a Thieves Guild. So essentially, I'm building the skeleton and some of the details that you might want to include in your games, whether it be for a campaign or homebrew, or perhaps a module that you want to create. My vision for this is to not only show you how to use Fantasy Grounds, but also to give you some ideas, some inspiration on creating your own content in case you want to add to your existing campaign or make things a little bit more streamlined for your gameplay. So trying to build this in a campaign as you go would be a little bit of work and probably end up backing yourself into a corner. So I think it would be helpful if you were to build this separately away from your campaign and then export it as content that you can use in regardless of which campaign you're in, depending on your rule set. And also just kind of knowing where to put stuff and how to put things together. I'm going to end up building some content in the book it used to be called the reference manual, but now they call it book. So I also got a little bit of art here. So what I did is I took chat GPT and created some artwork and put it together in Canva, did some editing to it. So essentially this is kind of like the cover, if you want to call it that. And if we wanted to, we can take this image and set this as the background decal. So this is kind of gives me a little bit of inspiration. Sometimes when I don't feel like working or something, it needs something to give me inspiration. So sometimes I'll swap out the decal in the background to kind of keep me focused on what I'm doing. Or you can just add this to your campaign to show your players. I mean, however you want to do it. But essentially, this is 3 images. You got this kind of book-like image in the background. You got the rogue here, and you got this dagger, which is supposed to signify the Azure Shadows Thieves Guild. So this is kind of like a cover kind of promo type thing. So if you want to, you can set this as your background decal and kind of use that for inspiration. It kind of is topical. It has to do with what you're working on, that kind of thing. And if you're really in the mood, you could add music, it's kind of to work to. Got one other picture here. This is for to show the players, or perhaps just for the GM. So this is supposed to represent the 5 main NPCs that are that make up the Azure Shadows Thieves Guild. So they're all, I guess, they're responsible for different aspects of the guild, and then they report to the Wraith, who's I think he's like the boss, and then the rest of them are kind of like mini bosses of their own type of category. The other thing I've done here is I loaded the player agency extension. So if you're not aware of that, this kind of gives you some, I guess, some tools to kind of create stuff. So when you want to prep for a campaign and you want to keep track of all the different things that are going on with your politics or cities, those sort of things. This is kind of a world builder. It allows your GM to kind of flesh your world out, give it more structure, instead of just using story entries or the book. You can use this to kind of bind different things together. And what's nice is there's 2 fields. You can record information that's visible to the players if the GM decides to share the record. In addition, the players can also add their own notes to the player fields. So it kind of becomes a record of sorts where you can keep track of stuff and where players can interact with your notes. There's an investigator tool that allows you to create and share your own interactive clue sheets to track knowledge and leads into different locations. So this would work really well with kind of a rogue type organization, especially if you were playing in one, or you were going to run something where everyone in the group was a rogue or a thief or something. And then there's also a diary section where players can add their own notes to the campaign calendar. He's pretty good at keeping his content up to date. He's got over 2,300 subscribers, so that really tells me that it is something that people want. And I really appreciate him doing this. And this was kind of structured off an older module that came out years ago, but nonetheless, it's really useful. The only thing I could say on this is when you rely on something like this, if it breaks, it might take a few days to get updated. That's my only drawback for this type of stuff. So this shouldn't break too bad. I mean, if Fantasy Grounds changes the way the frames work and that sort of thing, that's probably about the only thing that'll break. So he'd probably have to go in and fix that to retheme it for the updates. But other than that, I don't see any other functionality other than permissions that would break anything. So I think the breakage percentile on this is a lot less than others. So this doesn't impact your combat tracker and your character sheets and stuff. So I don't see an issue with that. So this I would trust more than others just because of the nature of it and what it does. So this kind of gives you a way to kind of enter, like in this case, factions or groups. You can enter cities in, and again, you have GM notes and player notes. So this would be helpful for world building and for keeping a very detailed campaign, records and that sort of thing for your games. So I have that loaded into Fantasy Grounds, and it's really not too hard to do. You have like this world builder window down here, and then when you open up a record, a new entry, you set what type it is. So it can be a place, a group, an entity, a dungeon, a religion, or other. So those are your record types. And then you have the other tab for public stats and GM stats. So it's pretty neat. You can do lots of really interesting things with it, like kind of like building a journal and having a record. The other thing is there's this investigator, which is where you can put notes. So you can put info for these different places, and you can link these to different spots in your campaign. So that's kind of interesting. And then there is a interactive calendar type plugin, so I have to enable that. So if you're new to Fantasy Grounds, there is a calendar that you can use to track in-game or even real-time stuff if you want. But this is basically this is a free module that comes with Fantasy Grounds. It's a calendar module, so just click on calendars, and it will bring up the calendars for Fantasy Grounds, and then you have all these different calendar types. I'm going to just use the Gregorian calendar or standard one, but there's different worlds represented here. So if you're going to use that for different types of in-game, keeping track of dates and stuff or events, you could do that. So I'm just going to do the Gregorian calendar, but just the caveat is if you pick a calendar, you're kind of stuck with it. If you try to disable the module and re-enable it and start it over, you're going to lose your entries. So just keep that in mind. So this is just a calendar system that you can use, and then you can add log entries, kind of like player notes and such. So this is just stuff that you can utilize to enhance your game and keep track of things and do some prep for like notes and that sort of thing. So those are just some things that would kind of work well with like a Thieves Guild or any type of organization, maybe Adventurers Guild, those sorts of things. So that's the only reason I brought that up, because I think that's an important tool to have if you want to get that detailed. Some players and some GMs just run right out of the module. They don't care about all the extra stuff. But then there are others who do, that do world building, that really want details and all kinds of stuff. So those would help with that. So then we're going to get into the type of content that we're going to be putting into this material. So it's going to be a little bit of art and a whole bunch of text, some tables, that kind of thing. I won't have time to go into every single little thing, but I will go down and kind of break down the notes that I have for this particular show. And this will kind of go into, building NPCs and building records that you can put into the new book builder, so you can kind of create your own manual. And in this case, I'm going to create one NPC, because I do this on almost every single show that I've done, and I think it's important that people understand that there is a tool available to make it easier to input this type of data. So you can import tables and you can import NPCs. And for the 5e rule set, I don't think that's universal with all the other rule sets yet. However, you can import tables. I think that's fairly universal. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go into the campaign records, and down here on the bottom or in the middle, there's NPC records. And all I'm going to do is create an NPC that's going to represent the Azure Shadow Thief. So this is going to be like a low-level NPC, and I'll use it for testing and for checking things out, and also for teaching and such. So I'm going to come down to this bottom here. You can create or import text from down here where this hamburger menu is. But the first thing I do in a lot of cases is I will make my own group. So I use the drop-down menu, click on the green Add Category, and it'll say Group 1. So I'm going to hit the Edit button right above there, Edit List, and then I'm just going to call this Azure Shadows NPCs. And that way I know what group this is from, and I also know what section, so this will go with this particular content. And then I'll go ahead and hit Stop Editing, and now I have my own category where I'm going to build my NPCs. And you'll do this with all the different data types so you don't get lost, confused, get it mixed up with everything else. And the only thing I have loaded is the calendar and the SRD. I don't have a bunch of rules loaded. I just need this for reference and for examples. So that's all I'm doing here. So if you're going to build another rule sets and such, I think I'd just load the core book and then kind of build all your own stuff. Maybe occasionally load up the monster or bestiary so you can get an idea of how those are put together. But other than that, you don't need a lot of overhead and a lot of stuff on here. So now that I have that open, I'm going to click on Import Text, this hamburger menu. And again, I think this is mostly 5e for now. There might be other rule sets that have importing tools, but I haven't come across them yet, so I could be wrong. But anyways, so I'm going to hit Control V as in Victor, and it will paste the data into here. So I have a ChatGPT record open in my other monitor, so I'm not showing that right now. But basically, I'm going to take just the stat block information and copy and paste it into the first cell on the left. So I just hit Control V. I copied it over. I'm going to right click and go to Clean Up Text. This just gives you an idea of what the text is going to look like once it's imported. And then over here on the right hand side, I'm going to put all the notes. So this is the Azure Shadow Thief. So I'll put that on the right. And then what I'll do is hit Enter, and then you can highlight the text, hit Control 2. So Control 2 is to make this bold kind of heading type text, but Control 1 is standard text. Control 3 is a different type of formatting. So Control 1 to 6 are your different types of data types that you can put for text. So the sooner you learn those, the quicker this gets. And if you right click, you can do the same thing, go to paragraph types. And essentially the heading, here's a body text, chat frame, list, link, and table. So these are just different types of things that you'll get used to making as you get going in Fantasy Grounds. But once you learn the shortcuts, it's quicker than right clicking and having to select it. So now what we're going to do is add the stuff that is, I guess this stuff is not mechanical, so to speak, but it does give you background, and it gives you different things for this particular NPC. So what I'm going to do is copy and paste this image and put it back, or not the image, but the text back here. So this has his equipment list, which isn't normally something I would include on a stat block, but being that this is more of a teaching type thing, I might use this just for the sake of kind of showing you how to use the Fantasy Grounds. So this is the background information that we're going to be looking at right here. So this is the background for this rogue. Oh, this already has the background. I'll say just kind of delete that. Backspace. Okay. So this is basically personality traits, ideals, bonds, flaws, those sorts of things. And then there's an equipment list here, which isn't going to really help you much because of their items, but it's going to help me create treasure for this individual. So if I need to make a loot table, I can do that here and link it back here. So if you defeat one of these guys, or if you want to make a character, you'll have some idea of what types of equipment they normally have. But now that I have all the information in here, I'm going to go ahead and hit import. But if you wanted to add a link to an image, you could do so here. I might find the image of this and put it, link it in here and make a token out of this just so I have some kind of artwork with it. Because this is going to be your base rogue here without, not the bosses per se, but just the main operatives. So that's basically the beginning of putting this type of stuff together, is building your assets. So I pick NPCs quite often because there's so many of them and they take a long time to do. So I usually do those first. And to get that out of the way, also I do the artwork first. And if I have any maps that I need to do, I usually do those. So those are the first things I usually work on. Then I'll go into items, which is the next most time consuming and annoying aspect of creating content. So some people enjoy it. I personally can think of other things I would want to do, but if you got to enter items that are unique to your setting, there is that too. So it's a lot of work. The other data types like tables and story entries and making loot and stuff, or making the parcels, those aren't too bad. That's a lot of that's drag and drop, pretty simple stuff. So I think NPCs, the artwork, and items are probably the most time consuming. So I usually go after those first, and that way I don't burn out. Because if I save that for last, I get into a kind of a hurry and I just don't feel like working on it, and it just doesn't turn out very well. I kind of get discouraged and I kind of get burned out, and I get to the point where I don't even want to work on it after a while, just because of the amount of work that goes into it. And by the time you get to the end, it can be taxing. So I like to spend the ending time linking stuff together. That's your last step. That's probably the funnest part, is once you have all these things built, like your items, NPCs, images, encounters, like all that stuff built, then at the very end, you can link that stuff into your story. So anyways, let's hit import. Let's see how this turns out. So I'm going to go ahead and import it. And this is the stat block. Now, if you don't have a token, it's going to assign just a letter based off the first letter here. And this is the Azure Shadow Thief. And it just has some basic rogue stuff here. It's kind of more flavor than anything else. And then on the back is the notes and the summary. So it's a really nice summary back here, and then here's all that other stuff that I added. So it turned out pretty good. So what I'll do is I'll put this on the combat tracker just to check it out, see what it does. So I'll put that on the combat tracker, and then I'll click on the offense button, and I'll make sure here's the sneak attack damage, here's a dagger attack, here's hand crossbow, and then it has a couple of its other features listed here. So this particular rogue gets 2 attacks. So that's kind of the process for doing those NPCs. I'm not going to do any more in this show just because of time, but essentially that's what you have to do, is just build up all of one asset to help save time. If you do it, basically you keep doing this and you go back and forth between, let's say you make an NPC, then you make the treasure, then you make, then you go back and do that process all over again, you end up wasting a lot of time. And meaning that you're just kind of going back and forth between all the different data types. If you can stay in this record type and keep building all of your different NPCs, or most of them, and then move on to a different data type, it's a lot quicker and a lot more focused. So you don't get as distracted and discouraged, because if you do onesie twosie type stuff, it's going to take forever. Normally, I would take my outline and do that towards the end. But I'm going to do a little bit of work in the book area because a lot of people are still kind of uncertain on how that works. So I'm going to take the NPCs area and kind of close this for right now. And since I have a decent NPC to work with in case I need to test something out, it's all ready to go. So go like that, then unlock it. And if you don't want this name to show up when you put it in the combat tracker, you can unidentify it and just put rogue here or something like that. So that way, when you add it to the combat tracker, it's not going to immediately identify the name of the NPC. It'll say rogue at that point. So let me see if I can get this to work. So here I've unidentified it. Let's see if that does anything. Huh. It may be because I already have that other one on here. Let's try that again. So not identified. Let me make sure I have this right. Yeah, so here's the non-ID name is rogue. So let's see what happens. Yeah, so now it just says rogue. So this would be a way that you can kind of cut back on people knowing exactly what they're fighting. Like sometimes you have individuals who have memorized the entire player's handbook and they know exactly what the stats are and everything else. So if you can change the name up a little, instead of saying goblin or whatever, you can change it to creature or night monster or whatever you want to call it. And that way they don't guess right away what it is. So that is that. All right, so let's get into the story part of this. So you have a new section or a newer section called books. This is essentially your bookshelf where all of your content is going to be stored. And when you load books, they're going to show up here as your reference manuals, I guess, as you can call it. So instead of coming all the way over to your modules and then loading that, clicking on the module and then clicking on the reference manual, now it will just show the reference manual over here on the left of all your books. So that's where those will end up. Instead of coming all the way through here through the interface, you just come up to books and you can click on whatever reference manual or book. That's what they're called now, instead of going all the way through here. You can still do it this way. This is just the old way to access it. So now that we have that, there's a campaign button here on the top left. So if you click this, this is going to be a blank, basically a blank slate to start building your content. So you can build a new chapter, you can build new headers, you can collapse this, you can expand it. There's a lot of new functionality here. Nice thing is now that you can move this around a lot more. Before it was limited on what size you could have. So this is a really nice way to do this. So I'm going to create a new chapter and we're going to call this the we'll say Azure Shadows. And then what we'll do is I'm going to add like probably just add just a like an image like that cover. So I'm going to hit new chapter or new subchapter, I guess. Is that right? Yeah. So what we're going to do is put the Azure Shadows Thieves Guild. And that's basically what this is. And that's going to give us a starting point. And then from there, we can decide what kind of data we want to put in here. So we'll go with a new page. And here this could be a title, or you can repeat this information for the subchapter, however you want to do it. So that's what I'm going to do is take this. Hey, how's it going, Sundance? So here's the Azure Shadows Thieves Guild. And what I'm going to do in this case is create a header block. So I want to put the Azure Shadows. And it's going to seem a little repetitive at first, but then once you start getting going on this, it's going to be a lot more clear. And now once you do that, I'm going to put an image block here because this is going to take up quite a bit of room. This is the cover. And one thing you want to do is get all of your artwork done. It's way easier to do this if you have all that stuff already in place. So if you have a list of artwork that you want to use and then you organize it all in a folder, and then you add it to Fantasy Grounds in your assets area, and then you hit this refresh, it'll show up in your campaign area if you put it in that folder. So in this case, this is the campaign record. I could drag it straight from the assets, but if you want to share this data and you want it to be more a part of this campaign, I'm going to actually add it to the images section. So I'm going to create a new record. So, and now I'm going to do the group first. So add category, edit the category name. I'm going to call it the Azure Shadows. We'll say this is artwork, just so we have like a differentiation in case we have NPCs or maybe we'll have maps later. So go ahead and create that category first. There's my category menu. And then this asset, I'm going to actually drag this over, and that's going to make an image asset for the campaign. And I'm going to also drag the other art as well. So now I have these two scenes. You'll probably have more art than this in some cases, so this is just kind of a demonstration of that. So now that that is now part of this particular campaign, now I'm going to link this into the area here where the actual text right below this. So I'll drag and drop this record in here, and that's going to give you your artwork just so you have it here. And then I'll just call this Azure Shadows cover or something like that. So that way we can label the image. So that's pretty basic. You know, that's not really that big of a deal. This is very similar to how the reference manual builder was. So now you got other choices where you can do an image left or an image right. So if you want to make it like a PDF, if you have like a long vertical image, you could put that over here on the left and put your text on the right, or vice versa. In this case, though, I'm going to start off with just a stat block. You can do a dual stat block. So if you want to save room or you don't want a big long sentence, you can kind of cram them together in two sections. So I'm going to start with a single block, text block, and I'm going to paste the data in here. What's really, when I say in here, in the cell where the text cursor is. So I'm going to go to my Chat GPT records that I created earlier. So this has all my stuff that I worked on earlier, which is the story and how basically all the records that I'm going to be adding to this. And it's quite an extensive list of things. There's like all these different chapters. There's, this is going to be like an index essentially. So let's take a look at that. All right, so here are some detailed items. Yeah, we don't want that. Plot hooks, twists, mechanics, contraband items. So I really went all out. Like, there's a whole bunch of NPCs. There's a whole bunch of records. So I'm gonna have to go through all of these and figure out my priority here. And basically, I'm gonna have it create a an index. So what I want to do is I'll show you what I'm doing here. So I already have a lot of it developed in this conversation. What I'm going to do is ask it to create an index. So please create I'll say a simple index for all of the content and previous conversations above. And so hopefully it'll compile all of that. And usually it will. These do run out of context. So after a while, if you use this same conversation for too long and you don't give it a break, it will start drifting, like forgetting stuff. So even though it's larger now, that the capacity is greater, there's still a wall or limitations. So I've been asked the ChatGPT to make a index for us. And then I'm going to copy and paste this into Fantasy Grounds to just kind of give us an overview of what type of information is in this book. It's pretty extensive. There's a lot of information here, and there's just a ton of different little assets you'd have to build. So, okay, so this is basically your index. So I'm going to copy this information and go back into Fantasy Grounds. And I'm going to title this, let's see, do I want to make a title? Yeah, so I'll say index is going to be the title, and then I'll put this as bold, I guess, or actually a header. And then I'll hit Control Victor. And now I got to go through and reformat all this. Now, once you have it in Fantasy Grounds, this formatting will stay. And even if you copy it into a different record, it'll keep all your formatting. So this is index for the Azure Shadows content. So that I will make that bold, and then maybe have a header right here, and then here's the overview. So you can take this information and organize it so you make your own index in this case. So I'm going to take a look at the structure I had for the ChatGPT session. Take a look at that. Yeah, so here's the introduction. So this is kind of how I want it to look. So let's do that. So here's the introduction. We'll make this a Control B. And then this here is basically your bullet point. So I'm highlighting, whoops. I'm highlighting it and hitting Control 4, and that's giving me the bullet points. So this is kind of how you would format this. Now, if I wasn't yapping and going through this, it would take me a lot less time. But this is basically the process. It's a little slow starting off, but once you get used to where the function keys are and stuff, okay, so hierarchy and leadership is a separate area. So that's why it's nice to have a split screen. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but if you use Windows 7, you can essentially take and you can put this up here as a window. Let me get rid of these things here. Put this up here, and then you can stretch the other screen out and then have it side by side. So it's so much easier to do it that way than trying to flip back and forth between different screens. So I'm going to bring up the ChatGPT record and do the same thing. So I'll put that over here. And if you're using a PDF, this would kind of be the same process. So that makes it a little easier to copy and paste. So you're essentially just making two panels, and that way it's easier to copy and paste back and forth. So that'll help when it comes to doing this sort of thing. Let me see what happened here. Okay. All right. So this is basically, let me get rid of this stuff. Get rid of that. There we go. So this will help when you get into creating content and when you don't want to keep going back and forth, back and forth. This will help with that. So where did I leave off here? Yeah, let's see. It's quite a bit of stuff here. But anyways, you get the idea of, let's see, let's call it overview. Yep. There we go. I guess I have way too many. Let's see, overview. A summary of chapters for indexing. I got an index of the index. What do you know? That's not going to help too much, is it? So anyways, you build your index according to how you want it set up. So this hierarchy and leadership is actually not, this is actually a bold. And then again, I'm highlighting the text, hitting Control 4. And then you have stuff like that. So this would be just for text. And this is going to be like a kind of like an index, and you can actually link different pages to this. So if you have, if you build this out where they're all separate pages, you can link all those here and make a master index if you want. That might be helpful for, you know, jumping to a certain point. And let's see, I want to go back up here. Okay, back down to our index. All right, here we go. Okay, so yeah, so relationships and dynamics, that's another one. Then you got your divisions and operations, so we will make that bold. And then you have your, actually that's going to be control 2, that's going to be a header. And then I might put a space in there just so, there we go, just so it's not all crammed together. Yep, operational stuff, so this goes all the way down to commerce. So like I said, this is control 4 to make these bullet points. There isn't any other like hyphen or anything. This is about the closest you're going to get. Now we have a section on safe houses. So basically that's how this thing is laid out. Like you have the index, your overview. It talks about the history and the origin of the guild, their mission statement and their slogan, and then the rule set and use cases. So in this case, it's 5e. But you could probably use this in Pathfinder and other stuff if you don't add any mechanics. Let's go to safe houses and location. So that's going to be there. And then these are different places that don't have any maps yet. They don't have any art or anything, so it's kind of left to your interpretation. But if I was going to make this a full-on product, I would probably already have all the maps for it. But in this case, it's not that far along. So I would have to give these to somebody and say, hey, make some maps for me, please. And maybe they'll do it for a cheap price, or maybe I'll do my own in Fantasy Grounds. The only problem with doing it in Fantasy Grounds with the assets is if you don't export the image and re-import it as a full image, you have to rely on the fact that the person using your content also has the art subscription. So if you're going to make art in Fantasy Grounds that doesn't have like all the, you know, animation or you know, that kind of thing, you can export the image when you're done and then re-import it as a WebP or PNG file and attach that to your campaign, so that way it's not relying on the internals. So if your players don't, or your other GMs don't have the assets, at least you'll have the map. And you're able to do that. You're licensed to do that within Fantasy Grounds. So let's see, safe houses, secure locations. So that is control 4. And then we have the story arcs. So this is more getting into the NPCs and how they recruit and, you know, that kind of stuff. So story quests and story arcs. So that's control 2. And this is, let's see, mission. This is templates and adventure hooks. So we'll do this. So that's going to be B, and then there's two examples here. So control 4, control 4. So I'm just going through here and essentially making this into the kind of like an outline of all the different data. So there's going to be a lot of stuff. If I went through all this and built it, it would probably take me a few hours, but this is a lot better than it used to be. It used to take a lot longer, and then there was tons of stuff that you had to do in order to get to this point. So it's a lot better in this regard. It's still a lot of work. I mean, don't get me wrong, but at least it's better. Okay, so then you have, here's that equipment list, the stuff that might be included for if you're going to use this guild. And really what this is an example of a guild, an organized crime, essentially. And it gets into like things like I included, like, you know, like why why did the guild form? It's usually for extreme circumstances. So you start getting into like, what caused the guild to become a thing, because normally they don't just do it just to do it. I mean, it's usually a response to something, usually being oppressed, or they might be refugees that are not, not allowed to do certain things, so they got to resort to this to survive. Or it could be some pirates that are under the gun, or people evading taxes, or there's all kinds of reasons for it. But essentially, that is one of the things I include in here is, why you even have the guild. A lot of times the guild's already established and you don't really have a whole lot of information on that. You just have to assume they're there for a reason. But when you make your own, it's nice to include some of those details because it adds to the story and the enriching your plots and stuff. So when you got a lot of that already kind of mentioned in here, it gives you something to build upon. Coming up with that from scratch and doing that during the middle of the game is pretty tough to do. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is something that comes up occasionally that you wish you would have had more time to think about it. But so be it. It happens. So this is just me showing you kind of how to do this, but also giving you ideas of like, this is a type of content that you can build for yourself that will be used over and over and over in different campaigns potentially. So once I get all this stuff with the guild done, I'm going to export it, and that's going to be my template for having a Thieves Guild in most of my campaign settings. This is going to be rule set dependent on 5e, but if I wanted to make it a little bit less mechanics and items and stuff and just keep to the story and the lore, then I would build this in the core rule set and export it like that and just use it as a skeleton. But this is going to have a lot more to it, like NPCs and items and stuff, so it's going to be for 5e. But if I was going to do it for Pathfinder and all the other rule sets, I'd have to do all that stuff all over again, essentially. I have to build all the NPCs, all the items, redo all the artwork and such. Actually, the artwork would be done, but you get the idea. So there are some key stat blocks that I'm going to include. So like the guild master, the different individuals that are in charge of different things. So these are the main individuals. I think there's like 6 of them, 5 or 6 of them in the group. Yeah, there's 5. And then there's one that I have an operative that's not really one of the leaders, but he's like he's one of their main operatives. He basically he's a long con guy. Like he runs the long game, like the forever thing. And what he does is he's called the Widow Watcher. So he essentially has his eyes on single women. He basically preys on them. So when they die, there's usually rich, wealthy ones. He kind of schmoozes them and gets in under the radar there. He tries to swindle them out of their money. So he'll hang out with them for a couple of years, kind of have like this fake relationship, and he'll start siphoning her cash and sending it to the guild. Do stuff like leaving the back door open, and just all kinds of weird little things like that. So his name is Solace Nightshade, and he's a tiefling, and he basically goes in and charms the widow and takes her money. That's basically his. So that's the long game there. That's the long con. Not a very pleasant thing to think about, to be honest, but there are people like that out there. So here's the we got some crafters stuff. So this is poisons and poisoners kits. So we even get into some items. I don't want to do too many items because, like I said, that's a ton of work. I'd like to have a few unique items that are unique, or at least listed in for the group or for this particular organization. So like if you have an adventurers guild, you might have a slogan, a symbol, maybe a specific loadout that they're given if they're part of the guild. Like maybe they're given a parcel that has certain types of gear in it, like rations, water. You do all kinds of really cool stuff if you put your mind to it. So here's the crafting stuff. So contact poisons. So it gets into quite a bit of stuff here. It even gets into recruiting, like how they how they go to orphanages and charity places and they recruit. They go to they have their hooks in jails and prisons and stuff. So they're really organized. They have a a system in place that supports their organization. So this summary integration part at the end, I don't know if I'm going to keep this, but this is the Fantasy Grounds stuff. So this is kind of what I'm going over right now. The summary and integration into Fantasy Grounds, the steps to import it in, which I'm kind of doing now. Creating and importing NPCs, quests, items, mechanics, those sort of things you'll have to build out. And then you discuss your AI content creation. So I'm doing that a little bit here. I'm taking and copying and pasting the information that I generated through here. And the type of prompts I gave it is like create a write-up summary regarding putting the Thieves Guild in the Fantasy Grounds platform. And I essentially told it that this is going to be a YouTube video, and it kind of gave me this overview. And I'm using this as a way to kind of put together everything to make it easier. So this is just one example. But if I go all the way to the beginning, this talks about the overview of the, this is the actual information that's going to go into these chapters. So the Azure Shadows is a secretive and powerful thieves guild operating primarily in bustling port cities. So any city that has a port or like a large lake or maybe a big river, some kind of water so they can transport. Hey, those thieves guilds selling that smoke weed. Yeah, I do have a section on that. Matter of fact, Keith, I have a Black Lotus, and it's essentially that. It's a really bad drug. All right, so basically, they're renowned for their mastery of stealth, subterfuge, and maritime smuggling. The guild is both feared and respected by those who know of their existence. Their influence stretches from the darkest alleys to the highest echelons of urban society. So these guys definitely are enmeshed in whatever city you want to put them in. I didn't want to put them in the Forgotten Realms or any specific location. It's already kind of 5e as it is. I wanted it to be a little bit more flexible, so you just have to change the city name. Yeah. Let's see. So it gets into the hierarchy, how all this stuff is. For instance, there's the guild master, the enigmatic leader known only as the Azure Wraith. Few have seen their face, and even fewer have lived to tell the tale. The Azure Wraith is rumored to possess supernatural abilities, allowing them to move unseen and unheard. I believe is a tiefling as well. I don't remember. I have to look. The lieutenants, the Wraith's trusted captains, each responsible for a different aspect of the guild's operations. So you have the Whisperer, master of espionage and information gathering. You have the Revenant, head of enforcement and assassinations. You have the Phantom, the overseer of smuggling and contraband. And then the Spectre, the expert in forgery and documentation manipulation. So they have most of the aspects covered. You have Shades, which are elite operatives who execute high-risk missions. Like I said, that one guy was the he's a Shade, essentially, the guy that swindles the widows. Shadows are skilled thieves and spies, basically the backbone of the guild. They probably have elevated from a street urchin to that sort of role. So they kind of have like an echelon, like, whatever you're good at, they'll put you in that department eventually. The Ghosts are new recruits and informants tasked with low-level assignments and proving their loyalty. So these are just different rankings and different hierarchies that they have in this guild. And it kind of helps keep it organized and kind of knows, like, you'll kind of know who fits in where, that sort of thing. So the guild operations, for intelligence, the Azure Shadows have informants in nearly every corner of the city. They gather crucial information about political movements, merchant shipments, and rival gangs. So they keep tabs on that. Smuggling and contraband, they utilize hidden coves, secret tunnels. And the guild is pretty good at moving this type of stuff around the city and around the region without being detected. Heists and burglaries are known for their elaborate, meticulous planned heists. The Azure Shadows can infiltrate even the most secure locations, so they have some pretty talented individuals. There's like 3 or 4 I can think of that are super good at that kind of stuff. Assassinations and enforcement. So when subtlety fails or when they got issues, they will go after people. They'll use lethal measures. They have bodyguards, that kind of thing. So their assassins will go out for precision and discretion, but they do have thugs and stuff that they send out in case they need to shake someone down. So then it talks about their headquarters, like maybe it's beneath bustling docks, only accessible through underwater tunnels and concealed entrances, or it's a labyrinth of interconnected chambers, including training areas, living quarters, and war rooms, and then maybe a central chamber known as the Hall of Shadows. That's where the Azure Wraith and their lieutenants convene. So they have like a kind of like a meeting spot. So then it gets into the guild customs and lore. Talks about how new recruits will undergo a series of tests to prove their worth. Those who fail are rarely heard from again. So that's once you're in, pretty much. Let's see, marks of the shadows. Some will receive, or most will receive, an intricate shadow tattoo, like a mark, and it is set up to identify their rank and allegiance. So they're marked with, the main people. I don't know about the recruits, but the the lieutenants, the operatives, and the managers and all that, they have that mark. Code of silence. For betraying the guild is punishable by death. The Azure Shadows are fiercely loyal and maintain an ironclad code of silence. So they do have to adhere to certain rules and laws that within their own guild. So there's some adventure hooks that I had come up with that I had AI help me deal with here. So there's a merchant's plea. So if you had a quest where like you're going to be like a thieves guild, and there's a wealthy merchant seeking adventurers' help to retrieve stolen goods that were taken by the Azure Shadows. So you could do this 2 ways. You can be the thieves in the guild, or you can be against them. And I think that's where this becomes more valuable, is you can play it 2 ways. Kind of be a part of it and get involved with the heists. Or you can, essentially go up against them. So this gives you that flexibility to where you can do either or. And it makes it more valuable when you have it something like that. There's a heist adventure, which should probably appeal to more adventurers. You have to infiltrate the guild's headquarters and steal a powerful artifact if you're like players that are not part of the group. There's a War of Shadows where rival thieves guilds threaten the Azure Shadows' dominance, and the adventurers are caught in the crossfire of the deadly turf war. So those are just ideas. And then there's some other story arcs here that I had requested. So some side quest story arcs that you could use this content with. You have the Pirate Princess. Essentially, her father was this legendary pirate. She used to be a member of the Azure Shadows, kind of took to the seas after her father's legacy. So that's one thing there. Let's see. So it has information gathering, negotiation or confrontation, and hidden treasure. And then some twist is that the Pirate Princess is revealed to be a former member of the Azure Shadows who left under mysterious circumstances, and you can find that out through the quest. The treasure might be cursed. Taking it would bring disaster to whoever possesses it. So there's, a lot of different things here. You have the corrupt watch captain, where you got this kind of corrupt policeman, or that sort of story arc. You've seen that in nighttime television, like Chicago PD, that kind of stuff. You can kind of do a take on something like that, where you've got some corrupt guy, and it could build over 4 or 5 sessions, where you got this watch captain problem. and you find out he's secretly working with the criminal organization. He plans to eliminate the guild because they're going against his motives. So you got that kind of thing. And then you have the assassin and the ascension, which is basically an ambitious assassin within the Azure Shadows seeks to overthrow the Azure Wraith. So this is someone that wants to come up in the guild, kind of the wrong way, I guess, or maybe the right way. So those are just like little plot ideas to help incorporate the material that you're making. So when you make something of this scale and you want to get use out of it, it's nice to have some little side quests and some story arcs in there in case you want to use it, or if you want to run a complete Thieves Guild session. I think it'd be fun to do a complete Thieves Guild type campaign where maybe it's like 8 episodes. You're essentially all low-level thieves working your way up. You get involved with these heists. You don't have to be a rogue. I mean, you could still be a fighter, magic user. There's plenty of that. So the origin. So that gets into the history, and it talks about the founding of it. So the Azure Shadows were founded over a century ago by a group of 5 skilled individuals, each an expert in their respective fields. They were united by a shared vision of creating a powerful and secretive organization that would control the underworld of the bustling port city where they lived. The founders were. So it gets into who these individuals were. You had Seraphina, the Phantom. She's a master thief and illusionist. You had Dorian, the Revenant. Marcellus, he's the enforcer, assassin type. You have Lysandra, the Whisperer Voss, a former noblewoman turned spy. So she's involved with the political landscape. Tiberius, the Spectre Creel, is an expert forger and a con artist. He can create flawless counterfeit documents and identities, so he's one of those types. He's really skilled in deception and manipulation, and he also helps navigate legal and bureaucratic obstacles. So you got some pretty talented people. And Marius the Phantom Lucan is a smuggler with a deep understanding of maritime routes and trade, and he's also facilitates the guild's smuggling operation. He's known, he's got knowledge of the high seas and its hidden pathways and all kinds of stuff. So you got some really powerful founding members there. And then it gets into, how they became the Azure Shadows, like their name, their legacy. It talks about the founders' unique skills and principles. So, for instance, Seraphine's stealth. So members are trained in the art of moving unseen and unheard, mastering techniques that allow them to become virtually invisible. Dorian's discipline. So the guild maintains strict discipline and loyalty, ensuring that all members are dedicated to the guild's success. So each one of these individuals is in charge of that particular type of thing. So not only do they have an operation, but they also have a motive and the training type that they can provide and the influence. So for instance, Marius' maritime mastery, smuggling, and sea-based operations continue to be a significant part of the guild's activities, with members trained in maritime skills and navigation, so they can use boats and escape type things. So also Marius is involved with finances, and there's all kinds of dual roles that they have. So then I said, create a brief explanation of how a thieves guild might come into being. What brings this extreme or reaction about? So why do the individuals make these guilds, right? Severe poverty, enslavement, refugees, tyrannical rulership, revenge, there's all kinds of reasons. So we're going to break this out and put this into the guild area so that when people are using the content, they can have a basis as to why the guild exists. Because I know quite often we don't even know why. And if you're told why, it's very vague. It's just, it doesn't have much substance to it. So this gets into severe poverty, enslavement, all this sort of things. So like, for instance, tyrannical rulership, maybe rebellion and resistance. Under a tyrannical ruler, the oppressed populace may turn to crime as a form of resistance. Our secret societies, oppressive regimes often give rise to secret societies that operate in the shadows. So they may or may, set up because of that. Or revenge. There could be people that have personal vendettas, or maybe there's been a long history of violence and vengeance. So this would be kind of like, your different groups, political groups, fighting amongst each other. So then you get an example narrative. Thieves guilds as a response to social and economic crises. This gets into more deeper stuff, politics, even as a narrative for every single one of these type of things, like classic examples of hoodlum and underground operations. And you have like a Robin Hood thing, Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, Jesse James, the Sicilian Mafia, like Cosa Nostra. You have the Yakuza. So those are examples of organizations, so that you kind of a rough idea of what type of things to think about. So there's that to kind of give you some inspiration, and those are just real real life examples. So there's some common themes here, and then you also have pirates. So you had Blackbeard, Captain Kidd, let's see, and Bonnie and Mary Read, Bartholomew Roberts, or they know him as Black Bart. So he was known as a Welsh pirate who became one of the most successful and feared pirates of the golden age of piracy. So he captured 400 ships during his career, operating primarily in the Atlantic Ocean along the African coast. He was known for his bold tactics and formidable pirate fleet. So he was a strict disciplinary, implemented codes of conduct for his crew. His ability to lead and maintain control over a vast and successful operation made him a legendary figure. So this is why I included some of this history here, so you have some inspiration and ideas on how these organizations come together, who's running them, why they exist, all that kind of stuff. So it really gets into that to help GMs with, coming up with their own. So then sometimes they're just pirates that are seeking solace, refuge, and freedom on the high seas. So it could just be criminals looking to get away from their past. There's some notable figures here that they give them like common themes like search for freedom, economic necessity, opportunism, and charismatic leadership. So there's all kinds of stuff that you can do to embellish your content. So then it talks about their multifaceted operations. So they're highly versatile, they're very organized, they operate across various terrains and settings, from urban centers and seaports to the open seas and underground networks. Each division of the guild has a specific focus and set of goals, but all work together under a unified command. So that's very important to have that individual that can keep all this together, because they all have clashing personalities quite often. So the guild master, known as the Azure Wraith, who oversees all operations and ensures cohesion among the various divisions. So then here's the council, the high-ranking members we talked about earlier. So urban operatives, sea raiders, overland bandits, and underground networks. So these are the same 4 people that are in charge of those aspects of the organization. So they have a philosophy, they have a job, and they have skills that complement that particular individual. And it talks about their focus. So, for instance, the urban operatives, the leader, the Whisperer, or Lysandra Voss, her focus is on espionage, burglary, and black market operations within city environments. So her goal is to gather intelligence on political movements, merchant activities, and rival organizations, conduct high-profile heists and burglaries to amass wealth and influence, and control the black market, ensuring the flow of illicit goods and information. So this is just giving these guys jobs and roles and information. So when you run these NPCs, they have kind of a history, and they already have sort of a network set up. And you could take any one of these NPCs and use that as a boss. And that would just be one facet of the content that you're making. So you could do this with pirates. Like if you wanted to make a whole pirate thing, you can make a supplement just focused on pirates. And you get all your resources, all your notes, and use it. And make it ambiguous enough to where you can use it in other settings, but detailed enough where you have substance. It's not just a couple notes. And I think that's what we end up getting a lot with the products that we invest in. when it comes to buying a lot of these. I wouldn't say all of them. I'd say maybe 2/3 of them are kind of really vague and loose, and they just kind of give you some ideas. Whereas there's other supplements that are highly detailed, unfortunately not used very much because there's just way too much stuff to take in. So you kind of have to find that balance of, being generic enough to be reusable, but then not too detailed to be overwhelming. So there are different forms of balance, and then, brain capacity. So all this stuff here would kind of might be overkill for some of the situation here. Like I might leave out all that history stuff and just, do without. But for me personally, I like to have that in there so I have examples of what I'm trying to achieve in a narrative. Like maybe this group is more like the Yakuza. They kind of operate like that, or the Italian mafia, or whatever you think it is would fit, because sometimes you can't relate to it or you can't really imagine it unless you have a real world example in some cases. So that's why I included that stuff. Then there gets into some mechanics like recruiting, debauchery, desertion, all those sort of things. So vice and debauchery. So like many other criminal organizations, they have their share of vices and indulgences. These activities help maintain morale among the members, but can also be used as tools for manipulation and control. So you have vice dens, you have debauchery as leverage. There's all kinds of stuff in here that talks about this sort of thing. Then you have recruitment. Like, how do they recruit new members? How do they keep fresh? How do they keep talent? And they go deep. They go all the way to the orphanages, to the churches, to charitable organizations. They'll sponsor someone if they think they're going to be worth their grain of salt, their weight in salt. So they go out of their way to make this happen. This is a big part. This is like 1/3 of their operation is recruiting. They look for people that are going to complement what their goals are. And they probably do so even better than a regular government because they have a lot more at risk and a lot more to lose. So that could be, part of that. This gets into desertion, like what might happen to you if you leave. Then it gets into street level operations, like how the beggars, pickpockets, and informants work, and who they report to, and the responsibilities, and what kind of mechanics. So observation points. So beggars are strategically placed at key locations to gather information. They have a bonus to perception checks and can blend into background easily. Information exchange. Beggars pass information to higher ranking guild members through coded language or subtle signals. So that's where your thieves' cant comes in. So it'd be nice if you developed your own lingo, your own hand signals, kind of make that part of your game. So if you're going to run like a Thieves Guild game, that'd be interesting and make it fun, more immersive. It talks about pickpockets and that sort of thing. So from the pickpocket section, I could make some parcels that are ready to go. So if you pick a random pocket, you might have 3 tables that you roll on. One would be like low, medium, high, like for different treasure types. So one would just be like some coins, one would be some coins and some trinkets, and then the other might be a valuable magic item. And, so you can do that for pickpocketing tables and stuff. So there's a little bit on the mechanics here, but there was something, day-to-day activities for daily reporting, training, surveillance, market operations, and information exchange. So this really gets into really deep into, how this works. Here they were talking about the enforcement, like what the thugs and assassins do, basically how they're set up, debt collection, protection of rackets. So they offer protection for people that support the guild, and they control territories. They keep other gangs and other rivals out. So there's all kinds of stuff that goes into this. And I mean, this is probably, I could do a video for like 2 hours just on this, but just going to give you an idea of, the type of tools that are available to you and the type of writing and maybe some inspiration as to how you'd want to do this. The reason you'd go through all this is so you have something ready to go for whatever campaign you run. You got a whole thing about thieves. You've got the organization, the structures, all that stuff. When you start building these like modules and plugging these into your games, you'll have a pretty good idea of setups and people and personalities and all that stuff. I even made tables here for basic, like for a safe house, gets into all that. Let's see, there's points of recruitment. You know, they recruit out of prisons and all kinds of stuff. Let's see, this talks about the inner circle and how they're set up. Here's the artwork. Let's see, this gets into all the artwork stuff. Yeah, so there's all the pictures that I was working on. That was a picture of a heist. This is supposed to be where basically the thieves are getting chased by the authorities. You know, it's quite a bit. There's the cover. So I was working on a lot of stuff. But then this gets into inputting it into Fantasy Grounds. So this is what I wanted to show you guys, is that basically it's pretty comprehensive and a multifaceted Thieves Guild, this Azure Shadows. You can change the name if you don't like, if it's too corny for you or something. I just came up with that using ChatGPT. You use this content to incorporate in your games effectively. So if you want to integrate this, you'd create a campaign module. That's kind of what I'm working on now. And it's dedicated to just the Azure Shadows, but it can be any type of organization if you want to create. Like you can have a whole book on cults, and you know there's stuff out there like that, sort of. But it's usually flavored for whatever rule set or setting that it's in. Or these can be a little bit more generic. So even though the names are the same, you can use them in different settings. So it talks about character depth and NPC creation, items and equipment, locations and maps, quests and story arcs, automation effects. So you use Fantasy Grounds effects coding to automate common abilities and conditions related to guild operations such as stealth, poison effects, and magic item usage. So you use some of that stuff if and when necessary. Let's see. And then I do have an area in here where we did some tables. Rollable lists is what I call them. Because if you, like for instance, here is some code here. This isn't really code, it's just the way it's written. But you can take this information, and you can copy this, and in Fantasy Grounds, you could take and go to, let's see, we want to go with the tables. And again, I always make my own group, so make my own category, rename it. We'll call it, it'll just be Azure Shadows Tables. That's just without having a good title for it. And then from here, we can start building our own tables if we need them. So we can import the text. We can basically paste this stuff in, copy and paste. So this line or this pipe is going to separate the number value and the data. So this is Azure Shadows rumors. So these are rumors about this organization. And then I'm going to say delimited because I want to define this more. So we're going to separate by a pipe, which is why that's there. Is the column header in the first row? Yes, because that's the 1d8 and then the rumor. And then table ranges in the first column. That's over here on the far left. We're going to say yes. So that's how I do this. Import it. And it should come out right. I don't use commas, colons, or semicolons because when you have sentences, quite often there's a comma in there, and that'll make another row or column. I don't want that, so that's why I use the pipe. It's less likely to be included in text. So go ahead and hit import, and there you go. There's your rollable list, or in this case, you'd call it a table, and you roll. Yeah, I bet. Yeah, tables, story templates, AI. Yeah, it helps Keith with that because it speeds it up quite a bit. So now you have essentially, here's the thing. So I've heard whispers of a secret network of tunnels beneath the city used by a clandestine organization. So they're talking about the Azure Shadows Thieves Guild. So there's that. So yeah, hex crawl. This would be perfect for that if you were to, let's say, have a basic map or like West Marches style. Like that would really help with that. And the other thing I'm doing is I'm noticing that as the AI grows in power, I'm able to capture the video scripts from videos. So let's say you played a 4-hour game and you wanted to recap that, you can use AI to grab that information and pull it and use it to build your stories or to recap what you've done. So generally, though, 4 hours is a little much. I think a good hour is about maybe 2 hours at the most is a limit right now. But I imagine this summer or this fall we'll have more capacity so we can do those longer videos. But you could take the transcript from a video or a podcast and have it take that information, compile it, reorganize it, clean it up, and use it. And you can you ask it to take that information and summarize it for you. So if you record your sessions either through video, audio, or both, you can parse that in and it will take that information and summarize it for you. And if you pair it up with Fantasy Grounds, like the chat log, because this on the back end of Fantasy Grounds, this creates a chat log. So if I go down, I'm going to actually exit because I'm getting close to the end anyways. So you go down to Fantasy Grounds and you open up the back end, and this is my campaign, we'll say. Here's the Thieves Guild. This is my work folder. But you have this chat log HTML, and if it has enough information there, like hits, misses, saves, all that kind of stuff, you can create a template where it will analyze that information and then give you the output, and you can put that with your other text that you got from your videos. And when you line those up, you can make a play-by-play narrative type of thing. So you can take that information and use that to further your stories without having to go back and rewatch the whole video. Because you already kind of lived it, right? You already spent that 4 hours. You don't want to spend another 4 hours trying to figure out what happened. So if you really wanted to be organized, like with West Marches, or in this case, a hex crawl is kind of cool because you go to the next hex, you roll some tables, you can kind of give it a theme, like this hex is a swamp. So then you can have it all set up and geared around a swamp. Like I could see the use of that being really fun. But yeah, so tables, story templates, AI, yeah, exactly. So I like the idea that you can take some of this data, like I can take the DBXML data, which will tell you what books you have loaded. I think it keeps track of, I don't remember if it has your characters in there, but this data here can be parsed into, yeah, this has a lot of the text from the book. So you take that data and parse it and kind of make a summary out of what you're building. So there's all kinds of use cases for using AI. It's just a lot quicker. Yeah, the recap and log. Yeah. The only thing, Keith, is it's kind of limited still. So if you do more than an hour, it's going to cough. It just can't handle that amount of information. But, if you only play for a couple hours and, you don't have a bunch of stuff, you can also do it in sections. You can copy and paste like 1/4 of the text from the HTML and then just do it in sections so it's not so hard on it. Because if you try to do like take the chat log and upload it and try to parse that whole thing, if it's really big, it's going to choke. It's not going to do it very well. Same thing with YouTube videos. If it's an hour or less, it does really good. So you might want to break up the video or tell it to only go into it for an hour or something like that, and that'll help. But there is a cap, regardless of how good it is. But it's getting better. Before, I couldn't even do a 10-minute video. Now I can do around an hour. So you can take information from YouTube or whatever video source you have and parse that out and use that information, whether it be tutorials or stories or whatever. But anyhow, that's just a use case that I've discovered over the months that I thought was worth looking into, especially creating a player and a character tool to keep track of your narratives, and then also as a GM tool to keep track of stats and that kind of thing. I know that Doug made a thing that parses the chat log, and it kind of gives you statistics based off of that information. But I think having that and along with other things would be an excellent tool to have for a GM. And I've actually asked Smiteworks, kind of indirectly, can you guys make something like this? If you're going to provide a portal in the future for GMs, if you want to charge people for it, make some kind of tool that will do that, so we can have that information at our fingertips, like how many people had the critical hits, or something like that. You can have that kind of information, or how many heals were done in the game, what was the biggest monster they fought, just all kinds of stuff. But anyways, I think that's enough for today. I just wanted to show you some of the process, some of the things I was going through, some of the tools. Hopefully this inspires you to do your own thing and figure out, what you want to do. The Chat GPT thing, you don't have to make art with it. You can just use it as a creative tool to help you design stories, so you're not spending all day writing. And I think that's where it really helps me a lot, because I can make a lot of stuff. I've done lots of different things with it, and I have these different tools that I've made, like this one, like the one D&D reference. There's a Fallout universe. Let's see. There's an effects builder. So if you wanted to create an effect for if your system supports it, you can ask it to create an effect. And what it does is it pulls on the data that I uploaded. Basically, it's pulling on the database, the Atlassian guide for the 5e effects coding. So that's just stuff you can do to make tools to help you run your game. But you can ask it, can you, let's say create a sneak, just say a sneak attack, even though we already kind of know. Create a sneak attack effect for a 4th level rogue character. Create a sneak attack effect We'll see what it does. I gave it a lot of information. I don't know if it still works or not. Yeah, it even tells you how to do it. What do you know? Yeah, it does. So here's how it would look. 2d4, 2d6 precision. I don't know. This should be not precision, but that's wrong. But this should be whatever damage type, like stabbing. Duration 1 round, target self, expend on next roll. So it just tells you even how to set up the automation for it. So some of this isn't correct. Like I said, this damage 2d6 precision should be the damage type, not precision. So it does get some stuff wrong. But for the most part, 90% of that's correct. So you can do stuff like that too. Once you feed it the right information, you can get some pretty decent output. You kind of have to give it examples of what you want, and once it knows kind of what it's after, then it can help you pull that information. So this all comes from the effects Atlassian wiki guide for the 5e rule set. I've done one for Pathfinder 2, and got something for Cyberpunk. So these are different tools I use for creating content. And I have one for Tales of the Valiant that's coming up. I kind of have a little bit of a tool set here, depending on what I'm working on and what kind of stuff. So Fallout, I'm working on an Alien one right now. We're taking the 2D20 rule set and the Alien universe and some websites that I can pull upon for inspiration. So there's all kinds of stuff you can do. And then I got some for making art, and then I have one for, this is the YouTube video timestamp expert. So this is the one where it goes in and will help you make timestamps for the videos, depending on how long it is. So there's so many different things you can do. But anyways, guys, you have a good night. Happy Friday tomorrow, or